He is the host of the On the Spot podcast. We have the pleasure in welcoming Greg Goods onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Greg?
Man, I'm doing great, man. Doing great. It's not that cold in Houston, but we'll be all right.
Yeah, same thing here. Pretty dry weather. Kind of avoid all the typical winter storms, but there's kind of like a storm brewing in the NBA. And since you're in the Houston area and since you have a lot of knowledge regarding the Houston Rockets, this is the perfect time to have you on just regarding this James Harden trade. So I guess I kind of want to get your overall opinions on James Harden as a whole, like as a player, and what you're like before this trade happened. What were your overall feelings regarding him with the Houston Rockets? As he seems to be two sides of what's going on. Either one, it's the aspect of him just being a choker and him being extremely overrated, or him not necessarily having the right pieces around him and him pretty much being a superstar player, but things haven't broke his way. Which side of the fence do you lie on?
I can't say he was a choker. I mean, I've been somebody that's been supporting James Harden for 8 years. You look at any NBA superstar, you can't name me one that's been to the playoffs every time, that put their team in the playoffs every time. So I can't call him necessarily a choker. He's had bad playoff moments for sure, don't get me wrong. But he has to understand that he has to take this accountability as well. I think there's a line. It can't go too far. I'm going to go right in the middle with it. He was a part of every process of every free agent signing, every trade deal. He was able to pick his players. I just think it comes down to that James Harden, if he wants to win the championship, he can't be the number one option. He can't bring it. I think that's just what it is. He's just a really, really good second option. I think people just have to realize that. And he did try his best. No breakup in the NBA is going to be great. It's never going to be a smooth thing with him. He could have handled it better, but hey, he's in a different situation. We got things back, but it's crazy. The whole and I had optimism when he first got traded. When he first heard the trades, and I heard about Christian Wood, I knew Christian Wood was going to be good, and I knew he's never had a big man like that before. So I was like, yo, if he got on like an 8-game win streak or something, like it may help, but with all the COVID stuff happening, it just didn't work out. And the Lakers, that Lakers game was pretty much a nail in the coffin of pretty much how he felt. But man, even with the trades, had Brooklyn waited an additional 10 minutes, James Harden would be a Philadelphia 76er. So it was crazy how to the last minute, because I was almost convinced that Ben Simmons was coming here. But that picks and everything. So I'm really like the situation that we're in. I think we got enough back.
And do you think with just Harden in general that have a town really, I guess I want to ask, how did the city of Houston embrace him? Did they really like appreciate him while he was there? Or do you think there was a lot of this impatience in terms of the lack of playoff success? Like, when is this dude finally going to take you all to the promised land and nothing's happening? How did the city feel towards him?
We loved him. Yeah. We loved him like crazy. He was ours, because it's something about when other people, pretty much hate, or not hate, but just dislike. All over the media, it's like, James Harden is unwatchable. He travels, all that other stuff that you see from outside the media. We gravitated towards it, and we were just like, hey, like, yo, we love things that are hated. Look at the Astros. We love them because everybody else hates them right now. So It's kind of one of those things where we was riding with him even when the outside media was just like, yo, he's not going to be able to win like that. And we're like, yo, watch it. We always come back to the Chris Paul hamstring injury. We always bring that up. And we love him. And we pretty much almost kind of blamed every free agent. We always kind of Dwight Howard. We blame Chris Paul. Well, not blame him, but we said Chris Paul was the reason, even though James Harden, if he really was that dude, he could have got it done, because we were up 10 points in that game in Game 7. But we go back to Chris Paul. We go to Russell Westbrook just not gelling. When in actuality, he has to take some of this blame too. But we love him, definitely.
Greg, are you happy with the haul that Houston got for James Harden? I mean, usually, kind of traditionally, we think of these big, massive megastar trades as the team that gets that big name is the team that wins the trade. For myself, I'm not so sure, because of everything that Brooklyn had to give up to get him. I mean, they give up not only their future in terms of those draft picks, but they also give up that depth that they were so credited for. Do you see it that same way on the Brooklyn side? And then also on the Houston end of things, are you happy with what the Rockets were able to get, given that they didn't want to give him up, but ultimately had to?
Yeah, from a Rocket standpoint, they did a good job. Shout out to Raphael Stone. There was a lot of question marks when Daryl Morey left on if he was the dude, if he was going to be that guy. I think because we are in a culture shift with the Houston Rockets, I'm really proud that our organization kind of stand packed and just didn't give him up for pennies because he just wanted out. At first, I was really rooting I was really rooting for Philadelphia more at the time because I was looking at that young star and Ben Simmons, and he can build and rapport with Christian Wood, and we can also kind of win now without having a horrible kind of rebuild. But after the Brooklyn Nets thing, we flipped Karis LeVert for Victor Oladipo, and we got 8 picks out of it, 4 picks and then 4 pick swaps. I looked at it like, yo, we got a lot, and normally it's the other way around. Like, okay, whoever has a star player, that's who really won that trade. But I think they did a good job with the circumstances. Now with Brooklyn, this is the first time I've ever seen a 4-team trade deal like that. I mean, I've seen 3 teams before. It's kind of out of the ordinary. It was a little disappointed that they got rid of Jared Allen in the process. I thought that was a huge blow. I'm a huge Jared Allen fan.
Yeah.
And you get rid of Karis LeVert. So, I mean, unless you really know what Kyrie Irving is going to do, me personally, if I'm Brooklyn, you can use Kyrie off the ball, but I would shop Kyrie for assets. I would do and try to because I don't know who else you have on your bench. I mean, you have Joe Harris. DeAndre Jordan is a big, but he's not like Jared Allen. So it's just a matter of how they're going to set things up in Brooklyn. But based off of the game last night, they'll be okay. They'll be fine. I think they can come out the East for sure. But when it comes to playing the Lakers in the finals, I don't think they have that depth like the Lakers do. So it'll be interesting. But I would definitely shop Kyrie.
Yeah, and I would say other than KD on that roster, I mean, who's really set to play playoff defense? And of course, if KD's playing harder on defense, he's probably going to be able to give a little bit less on offense, which, I mean, they have plenty of that. Where would you say, if you had to just kind of, get out your crystal ball and predict, I mean, how far along is Houston on their rebuild? The Celtics come to mind to me when they moved on from their big 3 of, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett, and got a lot of assets for those 3 pieces. It's not a perfect analogy, certainly, but where do you think Houston is, kind of on a range of like playoff contender to starting from scratch?
I think the beauty in this one is that the way we got a haul back, we don't necessarily have to start from scratch, and we don't have to necessarily be bad to utilize these picks because none of these are our picks. I mean, Daryl Morey traded all of our picks away. So no matter how good or bad it is, our picks don't change because of that. So we can use those picks. I mean, we've been notorious for not using our picks, trading them for bigger players. And I think there's always been a big narrative in Houston that we don't draft well. We're not a good drafting team. And I beg to differ on that. I just think that our first round and our second round picks are both developmental picks because they're not in lottery. People kind of forget. I mean, Clint Capella came out in the second round and you developed him, but you didn't wait long enough for Montrezl Harrell to develop. You did not wait long enough for one of the Morris twins, which we drafted a while back, to fully develop. They need that time to develop, and we're going off of James Harden's timeline to win a championship. So, of course, you're going to flip those players to get somebody like Chris Paul anyway. But I think, honestly, we're 1 or 2, pieces away. I think we're in playoff contention. I think we can make the playoffs this season with John Wall and Christian Wood and Victor Oladipo because our bench is looking great. I mean, we're only been playing 8 people at a time right now because John Wall is kind of out right now. But they're out here to beating the San Antonio squad that's fully loaded. So that's very encouraging as a second unit team being able to do that. So I think championship-wise, we're a ways to go, but we're definitely in playoff contention. I think we're 1 piece or maybe even 2 pieces away from competing back from the championship. And I don't think that's going to take long either. I don't think it's going to take Boston Celtics long either. Maybe 2 or 3 seasons.
What do you make of the Kyrie Irving situation? It seems like I want to like sympathize with him as best as possible in terms of, hey, mental health is something serious regarding everybody in life. However, like there's that you track his career, he's been in every type of scenario to succeed. He's had LeBron James, he's had his own team with Boston. He was the man in Brooklyn. He got Kevin Durant. It seems nothing's good for this guy. So like you said, it seems like it's just best to cut bait in the trade assets. But from a Kyrie Irving perspective, what's left for this guy to succeed in this league? He's super talented. I love watching him, but I think as a teammate and as a person who related to basketball, I guess, issues, because I think off the court we know about his charitable donations he's made and about how he's helped the WNBA and et cetera. But just on the court dealing with teams, he just doesn't mesh with anything. So my question is, what do you think his future is in the league? Because it seems like he's put in all these different places to succeed. And besides Cleveland, it just seems there's issues all the way around.
With Kyrie, I mean, even when he first left Cleveland, he said he wanted his own team. And I don't know, it's really unfortunate because every time he starts in a new situation, he's not established there long enough to kind of like be a part of that team. I think there's times even in Boston where it's just like he starts off very high with those first 5 games and then something happens, injuries, whatever. And then you realize the second unit, the first unit of that team, they're galvanizing, they're doing well. And then all of a sudden it's just kind of like, yeah, Kyrie can elevate us, but we don't necessarily need Kyrie. And I think Kyrie wants to be in a situation where he's needed, not necessarily something that he wants to add to. Which is kind of what made, Terry Rozier and all these other, pieces. And now we're here in Brooklyn. And now that you have James Harden here, his first game, he drops a 30-point triple-double. Yep. Kevin Durant gives you 42 points. Yep. And now it's just like, yeah, we don't really need you, Kyrie, but we will love you to help elevate us. And it's just a matter of how his ego is going to work. And I don't think Kyrie really knows what he wants out of this league at this point, because if he did, then he would already know. So, I mean, I think Kyrie, in hindsight, made this trade available for James Harden. I think if Kyrie is at these games, I don't think Brooklyn gives up as much as they want and as much as they're willing to offer, because they see Kyrie and KD, because that's a good – I mean, even in the start of the season, they were doing well. So – if he's here consistently, not missing any games, I don't think they pull that trigger. And I think Philadelphia is the stronger contender for James Harden. So, yeah, it's kind of up to Kyrie at this point and what he wants to do.
What do you make of that team as a whole? I mean, we've never seen 3 players with that much of, using that much usage rate. So, I mean, we saw with Golden State somewhat, but with these 3 guys, it's just – in my mind, I'm just trying to really fathom guys that really need the ball and with like combustible egos. I don't know if you're going to have the same scenario with Golden State, where it seems like Clay and Steph were able to somewhat sacrifice and everybody worked for the common good as well. The culture was really solid in Golden State, along with Steve Kerr. Well, in this situation, you have a first-year coach with Steve Nash. It just seems like a very rocky situation. So I guess I want to ask, do you see it being, despite their depth issues, which they pretty much traded away all of that, as 3 of them as a cohesive unit, do you see them being immediately successful? Like you mentioned, like you saw the performance with James Harden and Kevin Durant, but adding Kyrie Irving into that mix after, 20 games or so, do you see them being a cohesive fit basketball-wise on the court, or do you see them having some chemistry problems?
I don't necessarily. It all goes down to the leadership of Kevin Durant, because he's that leader of that team. And I think with James Harden, what we missed in Houston was that there was nobody to really challenge James, because nobody was better or even at his level. So the leadership that Chris Paul had, I mean, James Harden kind of shrugged it off because he's like, bro, you're not better than me. I'm just going to do what I want to do. In this situation, this is not his team. He's here to help. So he has a different mindset to it. So I know James Harden is going to be able to adjust well, because he's already played with Kevin Durant before. With Kyrie, in a way, he knows how to play off ball because he was playing with LeBron. So it should, in hindsight, it should be able to gel and mesh together. It just depends on the ego. And I'm not necessarily worried about the regular season. I'm just worried more about the playoffs, where you're in a 7-game series and, it's time to adjust. And when things are not working or that first plan is not working, what does plan number 2 look like? When it's time for a last second shot, who are you going to get mad when Kyrie just waves you off and he wants to do it himself? It's just one of those things. So I think you'll see immediate success in regular season for sure because they're talented enough to get through it. But I'm not necessarily looking at anything outside of the Eastern Conference Finals and the finals for these people. Because if they don't make it there, then it's a bust. It was not, for what you gave up, it's a bust.
Can you, going back to the Houston side of things, can you give us some thoughts about your initial impressions of Coach Silas? I know it's pretty much been chaos. I mean, nothing but chaos to start the year. But now, in my opinion, from the coaching side of things, it kind of moves into a nice situation for him in terms of expectations are now super low once James Harden is gone. He can kind of really put his imprint on this roster and maybe, hopefully do more of the things that he wanted to do without as much pressure as when James Harden was there. Can you give us your just kind of initial thoughts of him as a coach? And I know we don't have a whole lot of data on that really.
Yeah, I really enjoy Steven Silas. I like the hire. He was really supposed to be here. He was the runner-up candidate in 2016. He was supposed to get the job, but then Mike D'Antoni came through, and long story short, that's where it became. But his development, like his player development style, is phenomenal. I like the culture that he is attempting to change. And even when James Harden was here, Russell Westbrook was here because they both signed off on that coach. It's just a matter of he was very transparent, very straightforward. He wasn't sugarcoating anything, and I just enjoy seeing him because I know he's good with the young people. Like I know he's good with young guards and young bigs, young players in general. So I think it's not going to take long for Steven Silas to make this team successful because he's been in the league for 20 plus years. We have a great coaching staff. I really do like what we have. All he needs is just probably like one more young star piece. And, the rest is history. I think he's going to be very successful here.
Greg, I want to ask you, just as a fan, what is your opinion of how the NBA has handled COVID, not only from just a player safety perspective, but just you as just a viewer watching games every day? Just because, we talk to journalists and they seem kind of depressed going to this game without any fans and just – the Zoom interviews, it just seems like there's a lot of frustration going on and not a lot of ways of rectifying the issues, not to mention the way the NBA has handled their safety issues with some of their players regarding COVID. I've seen online some podcasts that stopped covering the NBA just because, they're really unhappy with how the league has, handled the pandemic so far. So in your mind, what are your thoughts in terms of how the season has progressed regarding the blowouts and just your overall impressions of how the season's played out?
I think the NBA has been doing the best that they can, given the circumstances. I try not to fret and get angry at the NBA because I remember 4 months where there was no sports at all. And I kind of, anytime I get like a little impatient or a little complacent about what's going on, I think back to what my month of April, May, and June was. And that was horrible. And I was just like, put something on, you know what I mean? Put anything on, golf, something. So I think they were doing great. Of course, when you're not in the bubble, you're gonna have cases. You're gonna have COVID things, different flare-ups. I just think once the playoff starts, it needs to go back into that bubble, and that's what I was kind of confused on with the NFL, why they chose not to do a bubble kind of ordeal. Because the last thing you want to see is. I know the Ravens just lost, but if the Ravens and the Chiefs play in the AFC Championships and Lamar and Patrick Mahomes both have COVID, you're coming out with RG3 and whoever they got out. That's just bad for business. So I would hope that they would put it in a bubble when it's time for playoff contention and whatnot. But they're just doing what they can. I think they're doing the best job possible. So I try not to harp on it. But me as a media person having to interview and do Zoom stuff, it's a blessing and a curse. Like, of course, you want to be there, but at the same time, it's cool asking questions to Christian Wood in your bed, just chilling on the couch sometimes. So give or take.
And what do you think from like just a fan perspective, just watching the games? I mean, just having piped in fan noise. I know some people are a fan of that. Some people just think it's kind of whack. And just the presentation as a whole. I know Golden State, I think they're the only arena to have digital fans like the bubble. And a lot of other arenas are not really incorporating that. So what are your thoughts in terms of just watching the games? You know?
Well, I will say at least I can't speak for other teams, but with Houston, we started bringing in fans, and there's some fans around.
Okay.
So like it's just really social distance, out the distance. But there's even some people that are like, they had courtside seats. They're just a little bit further away. So there's still a little bit of atmosphere. Of course, it's not going to be fully packed and whatnot. But I me personally, because I'm watching a whole bunch of Rockets games. From a Rocket standpoint, it seems fine to me. Even with the pumped up noise, it's cool. I don't really, as long as the broadcasters are fine. You know what I mean? As long as the broadcasters don't sound like they're on Zoom or anything like that, as long as that's cool, and I still get to see Mark Jackson and whoever's Van Gundy. If they're there and there's not any like interns doing whatever they're I'm good. But the fan noise, it's fine.
Well, Greg, thank you very much for joining us on this Sunday afternoon to talk some hoops with us. Please plug your social media, anything you're working on that our listeners should pay attention to.
Yes. Just dropped the episode, I think not yesterday or 2 days ago. Go check that out on all of my social media accounts at OTS Network on the Spot Podcast, where we call random people about the hottest topics across all platforms, all entertainment, sports, music, and entertainment. Just if you're interested, DM me. We can talk sports, hoops, whatever, anything like that.
Awesome, Greg. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it, man.
No problem.